Steam rose from the ancient copper pot as I stirred the broth that had been simmering for 12 hours. The tiny kitchen of Golden Dragon Noodles was barely big enough for 2 people. But somehow my grandfather had created culinary magic here for 40 years. Now it was my kitchen, my legacy, even if my husband's family considered it worthless. Still playing with noodles, May? My mother-in-law Helen's voice cut through the peaceful morning preparation. She stood in the doorway, designer handbag clashing with the humble surroundings. Richard's new steakhouse is having its grand opening tonight. Surely you're not planning to stay here all day? I kept stirring, watching the rich golden broth swirl. Someone has to run the restaurant, Mrs. Chen. These recipes have been in Grandfather Liu's family for generations. And now they're just taking up valuable real estate, she sighed. When your father-in-law divided the restaurant properties, he should have given this location to Richard too. At least he knows how to turn a profit. I am Mai Lu Chen, and 3 months ago, I inherited what my in-laws considered the black sheep of their restaurant empire, a tiny noodle shop in Old Chinatown. While my brother-in-law Richard received the family's chain of upscale restaurants, I got the smallest, oldest property in the portfolio, the original Golden Dragon, where my grandfather had started his culinary journey in America. What the Chen family didn't know was that during the last 5 years of his life, I was the only one who apprenticed under Grandfather Liu. While Richard was busy expanding the chain with trendy fusion menus, I spent every morning learning the subtle arts of traditional cooking. Grandfather taught me secrets that weren't written in any cookbook, techniques and recipes passed down through 15 generations of Liu family chefs. Your brother wants to make an offer, Helen continued, wrinkling her nose at the aromatic steam. This location would make an excellent quick-service sushi bar. Much more profitable than, she gestured dismissively, noodles. Thank you, but no. I adjusted the flame under the pot with the precision Grandfather had taught me. This restaurant isn't for sale. Helen's perfectly manicured fingers drummed against the doorframe. May, dear, be reasonable. You have a PhD in chemistry. Surely you don't want to spend your life in this kitchen. What she didn't understand was how my chemistry background had helped me grasp the complex molecular interactions in Grandfather's recipes. Each dish was a perfect balance of proteins, starches, and aromatics, refined over centuries of culinary evolution. Actually, I said, tasting the broth, my chemistry background is quite useful here. Would you like to stay for breakfast? I'm making Grandfather's special phoenix tail noodles. She declined, as she always did. In 5 years of marriage to her son David, she had never eaten at Golden Dragon. The Chen family's idea of Chinese food was what they served at their upscale establishments, modernized, westernized versions of traditional dishes. After she left, I continued my morning routine. The noodle dough needed to rest for exactly 30 minutes, no more, no less. The broth required constant attention, each ingredient added at precisely the right moment. Grandfather had taught me that true cooking was a form of meditation, a dance of timing and technique. David arrived as I was hand-pulling the noodles, his suit slightly rumpled from his early hospital rounds. As a pediatric surgeon, he kept unusual hours, but he always tried to have breakfast at the restaurant. Mom stopped by, he asked, noting my expression. With another offer from Richard, I confirmed, expertly stretching the dough into silky strands. He wants to turn this into a sushi bar. David sighed, watching me work. You know, sometimes I think you're the only one who really understood Grandfather Liu. Even Dad saw this place as just a stepping stone to bigger things. He was right. The Chen family had built their restaurant empire by modernizing and expanding, but they'd lost something in the process. The soul of traditional cooking, the patience required to master techniques that couldn't be rushed or automated. Your grandfather chose you for a reason, David said softly. He saw something in you that the rest of the family missed. Before I could respond, the morning prep cook arrived, signaling the start of another busy day. Golden Dragon didn't do the volume of business that Richard's restaurants did, but we had our loyal customers. People who understood the difference between fast food and food that took time to perfect. That afternoon, as the lunch rush wound down, an elderly man in an immaculate suit came in alone. Something about his deliberate movements caught my attention. He studied the menu carefully, then ordered the phoenix tail noodles in bone broth. I prepared the dish myself, as I did for all orders of Grandfather's specialties. Each component required perfect timing. The noodles cooked just long enough to achieve the right texture, the broth poured at the exact temperature to release its full aroma. The man took his first bite with careful consideration. His eyes widened slightly, and he put down his chopsticks. "Excuse me," he said, his accent precisely cultivated. "Who prepared this dish?" "I did, sir." "And where did you learn this technique?" I haven't tasted broth prepared this way since. Since the Liu family restaurant in Guangzhou, I finished for him. My grandfather was Liu Weichen. He brought these recipes to America 40 years ago. The man's expression changed from surprise to intense interest. "Liu Weichen was your grandfather?" "The last master of the Liu family bone broth technique." I nodded, suddenly understanding who this man might be. His next words confirmed my suspicion. "My name is James Wong. I'm a culinary inspector, and I've been searching for this broth for 20 years. The Liu family technique was thought to be lost when the Guangzhou restaurant closed." My hands trembled slightly as I realized the implications. James Wong was one of the most respected food critics in Asia, known for his work with the Michelin Guide. Would you like to see our kitchen?" I offered. He spent the next hour watching me prepare another batch of broth, asking detailed questions about techniques and ingredients. His eyes lit up when I showed him grandfather's handwritten recipe books, filled with notes in his precise calligraphy. "This is extraordinary," he said finally. "You understand, this isn't just cooking, this is living history. These techniques, these recipes, they're cultural treasures." Before he left, he made a quiet phone call. "Cancel my afternoon appointments," he said. I found something remarkable. That evening, as I cleaned the kitchen, my phone buzzed with a message from Richard. "Family meeting tomorrow. Discussing the future of all Chen restaurant properties. Attendance mandatory." I looked around the tiny kitchen, at the worn but perfectly maintained equipment, at grandfather's recipes carefully preserved in their waterproof box. Tomorrow would change everything, but not in the way my in-laws expected. Sometimes the most valuable inheritances aren't the biggest or most obvious. Sometimes they're hidden in simple things, like a perfectly prepared bowl of noodles, carrying centuries of history in every bite. The Chen family's private dining room at Imperial Palace, their flagship restaurant, sparkled with crystal and gilt. Richard sat at the head of the table, Father Chen's old place, while Helen presided over the elaborate place settings. The irony of discussing Golden Dragon's fate over westernized Chinese food wasn't lost on me. "As you know," Richard began, adjusting his Rolex, "we're planning a major reorganization of our restaurant portfolio. The old properties, particularly in Chinatown, need updating to match our brand's modern image." I placed my grandfather's recipe book on the table, its worn leather cover a stark contrast to the room's opulence. "Before we discuss changes, there's something you should know about Golden Dragon." Helen sighed dramatically. "May, dear, we know you're attached to that little shop. But business is business." "Yes," I agreed. "Business is business. That's why you should know that yesterday, Golden Dragon was visited by James Wong, the Michelin Guide's chief inspector for Asian cuisine." The silence that followed was absolute. Richard's fork clattered against fine china. "That's impossible," Helen whispered. "Why would a Michelin inspector visit a noodle shop?" "Because," a new voice said from the doorway, "we've been searching for the Liu family bone broth technique for 20 years. James Wong entered, followed by 2 other inspectors. When authentic culinary traditions are lost, they're often lost forever. Finding someone who has truly mastered these techniques is extraordinary." Richard recovered first. "Mr. Wong, I'm Richard Chen, CEO of Chen Restaurant Group. If you're interested in traditional Chinese cuisine, our chef at Imperial Palace serves competent but modernized food." Wong interrupted politely. "What your sister-in-law creates at Golden Dragon is something else entirely. Something we thought was lost when the Liu family restaurant in Guangzhou closed 40 years ago." I opened grandfather's recipe book. These techniques have been passed down through 15 generations of Liu family chefs. Each recipe is a piece of living history. The next 2 hours transformed everything. Wong and his team explained the historical significance of the Liu family techniques, how they represented an unbroken line of culinary tradition dating back centuries. They showed videos of my bone broth preparation compared to other restaurants, highlighting the subtle differences that set it apart. "We're prepared to award Golden Dragon a Michelin star immediately," Wong announced. with the possibility of a second star after our full review process. Helen's face had gone pale. Richard looked like he'd swallowed something sour. But it's just noodles, he stammered. Just noodles? Wang raised an eyebrow. Your sister-in-law's phoenix tail noodles represent 500 years of refined technique. The bone broth alone takes 3 days to prepare properly. What she creates isn't just food, it's cultural heritage in edible form. I pulled out my own notebook, filled with the detailed notes I'd taken during my apprenticeship with grandfather. I've spent 5 years learning these techniques. My chemistry background helped me understand the molecular processes, but the real mastery comes from practice, from understanding the subtle signs that can't be written down. We're also recommending Golden Dragon for inclusion in UNESCO's Intangible Cultural Heritage list, one of the other inspectors added. These techniques need to be preserved. David, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. That's what grandfather was protecting all these years. Not just recipes, but history. The transformation of Golden Dragon began immediately. While we maintained the original tiny restaurant, we expanded into the adjacent building, creating a culinary school focused on traditional techniques. The waiting list for tables grew to months long, but we kept prices reasonable, just as grandfather would have wanted. Richard's attitude changed when he realized the marketing potential of having a Michelin-starred restaurant in the family portfolio. He even asked me to consult on improving the authenticity of his restaurant's Chinese dishes, though he blanched when I explained how long proper preparation would take. Helen took longer to come around, but 6 months later, I found her in Golden Dragon's kitchen early one morning, watching intently as I prepared the bone broth. Your grandfather, she said hesitantly, he offered to teach me once. Years ago. I thought it was beneath me. She touched the worn handle of the copper pot. I was wrong about many things. Would you like to learn now? I offered. It's never too late to understand tradition. The culinary school flourished, attracting students from around the world. We added programs in other traditional Chinese cooking techniques, always emphasizing the importance of patience and respect for culinary heritage. A year later, Golden Dragon received its second Michelin star. The ceremony was held in our expanded space, surrounded by photos of grandfather Liu and the long line of family chefs before him. The entire Chin family attended, finally understanding what they'd dismissed for so long. You know what your grandfather told me once? David said as we celebrated that evening. He said cooking is like love. It can't be rushed, and its true value isn't in how much you can charge for it, but in how it nurtures the soul. The original tiny kitchen remained exactly as grandfather had left it, still producing the same perfect noodles and bone broth every day. But now it was also a classroom where I taught new generations the techniques that had almost been lost. Last week, a young student asked me why we spend 3 days making broth when modern methods are faster. I showed her grandfather's recipe book, pointing to notes written decades ago. Because some things can't be rushed, I told her. Every hour this broth simmers is another layer of flavor, another connection to centuries of tradition. Fast food fills the stomach, but slow food feeds the soul. Richard's restaurants still do well, serving their modernized cuisine to tourists and business people. But Golden Dragon has become something else, a bridge between past and present, a guardian of culinary heritage that almost disappeared. Helen now takes weekly cooking lessons, learning the basics of traditional techniques. She'll never be a master chef, but she's finally beginning to understand what grandfather Liu knew all along. That true value isn't always about profit margins and trendy menus. As I write this from my office above the culinary school, watching students practice the careful art of hand-pulling noodles, I'm reminded of something grandfather wrote in his recipe book. These techniques are not just about cooking. They are about patience, respect, and the understanding that some traditions are worth preserving, no matter how small they might seem to others. The copper pot still simmers in the original kitchen, releasing the same aromas that have scented this corner of Chinatown for 40 years. Every morning, I prepare the broth just as grandfather taught me, each step a meditation on the value of doing things the right way, not the fast way. Sometimes the most precious inheritances are the ones that others dismiss as worthless. And sometimes the smallest kitchen can contain the biggest treasures, if you just have the patience to understand what's simmering beneath the surface. The line of customers still stretches down the street each morning, waiting for their bowl of history and tradition served in broth and noodles. But more importantly, the line of Liu family culinary knowledge continues, passed down to new generations who understand that some things are worth taking time to preserve. And that, as grandfather would say, is the true measure of success.